Hello, everyone. Welcome back. Chapter 5 Rose and Lily. Jack and Annie staggered into the house. They were both shaking. Their shoes and stockings were gone. Their wet clothes were torn. You poor children, cried the woman. I was waiting for my husband to arrive. I saw you clinging to that tree. Come, sit in my parlor. Don't worry about the furniture. Rest. Dry out. You're safe now. Thanks, thanks, stammered Annie. Yeah, thanks, breathed Jack. He and Annie followed the woman from the entrance into the lovely sitting room. They sat down on a sofa and tried to catch their breath. I'll get you some towels and blankets, the woman said. As she hurried from the parlor, the wind howled and rattled the door. Rain pounded the windows. Jack thought the hurricane sounded like a monster trying to break into the house. He remembered the giant waves attacking the pier, tearing apart the bathhouses. I still have your necklace, Annie said, panting. Good, good, said Jack. He had his knapsack, too. He looked inside. The Texas book was ruined. Before he could tell Annie, the woman came back, carrying towels and two quilts. She handed the towels to them, and Jack dried his hands and face and hair. Then the woman wrapped one quilt around Jack and one around Annie. My name is Rose, the woman said, sitting down. You must tell me who you are. I'm Annie, and he's my brother Jack, said Annie. We're visiting from Pennsylvania. We just escaped from the waterfront, said Jack. The waves got super high, said Annie. So where are your mother and father? Said Rose. They're. Jack didn't know what to say. They're at the Tremont House Hotel, Annie said quickly. I know they're safe. Oh, but they must be so worried about you, said Rose. I wish they knew you were safe and sound with me. A baby started crying upstairs. That's my daughter. I'll be right back, said Rose. She hurried up the stairs. Rose is so nice, Annie said, and she's really strong. She pulled us both in. Right, said Jack. He was relieved to be in Rose's nice house, but he was worried about the others still out in the storm. We have to help more people, he said. I know, said Annie. We'll just rest here for a minute and figure out what to do. Rose came into the room with a baby in her arms. Lily, meet Jack and Annie, she said. Lily looked like she was about a year old. Hi, Lily, said Jack and Annie together. Lily stared at them with huge brown eyes. She had dark curly hair and rosy cheeks. She's so cute, said Annie. The howling wind scared her, said Rose as she sat down with the baby. So, what did you see out there? Huge waves, said Jack with a sigh. They covered everything. The streets got flooded fast. Everyone was trying to escape. Oh my, said Rose. My husband Lucas should never have gone out to work this morning, I told him. Where does he work? Said Annie. At a music store that's just off the Broadway, said Rose. I've been expecting him to arrive home any minute. Rose stood up and walked to the window and looked out. The water's getting higher, she murmured. Lucas better hurry. Jack felt bad for her. He remembered the waves destroying the boardwalk. The wind shrieked. Thunder rumbled. Lily let out a wail. There, there, baby, don't cry, said Rose, gently laying Lily in her arms. Think of this as a big adventure. A gust of wind shook the house. Lily kept crying. Hush, baby, hush. Papa will be home soon, said Rose. She started singing to Lily. Hush, little baby, don't say a word. Papa's going to buy you a mockingbird. If that mockingbird don't sing, Papa's going to buy you a diamond ring. Lily stopped crying and looked at Rose. Papa, she whimpered. He's not here now, darling, but he'll be home soon, said Rose. She turned to Annie and Jack. Lucas sings that song to her all the time. Rose looked out the window again. He would do anything to keep Lily and me safe. I don't understand why he hasn't come home yet. What can we do for you? Asked Jack. You helped us, said Annie. We'd like to help you. Oh, you're both so kind and brave, said Rose. You sound like true Texans. She took a deep breath. I'm certain Lucas is fine. He's got to be fine. I'm certain he's fine too, said Annie. Suddenly, a huge blast of wind blew open the front door. Jack and Annie leapt from the sofa. They rushed to the door and tried to push it closed. The wind pushed back. Jack felt water splash over his bare feet. He looked down. Seawater was streaming through the open door. Jack, look out, yelled Annie. The wind ripped the door right off its hinges. Jack and Annie jumped out of the way as the door crashed to the floor. Seawater began pouring into the house. Chapter 6. Escape! Upstairs! Cried Rose. Holding Lily in her arms, she splashed across the parlor to the stairway. Jack grabbed the knapsack and hurried up the steps after Rose and Annie. When they reached the second-floor hallway, Jack heard glass shattered below. He looked down the stairs. The first-floor windows had broken. Water covered the parlor floor and was rising fast. A chunk of upstairs ceiling crashed to the floor of the hallway. It barely missed them. This way, shouted Rose. Be careful. Still carrying Lily, Rose led Jack and Annie into the dark bedroom. She shut the door. There, she said. Shutting out the hurricane was impossible, though. The windows in the bedroom were broken. Glass was everywhere. Wind and rainwater swirled in. Jagged pieces of roof shingles blew inside. Get down! Cover your heads! Rose cried. Shielding Lily, Rose knelt down between the wall and the bed. Jack and Annie crouched behind her. The baby buried her face against Rose. The house kept swaying back and forth. Jack felt water under his feet. It was seeping under the bedroom door. We need to get higher, said Rose. The roof. How? Said Jack. Follow me, said Rose. Carrying Lily, she led Jack and Annie out of the bedroom. The rising seawater had reached the upstairs hall. Rain was pouring through a giant hole in the roof. If we can just get up there, on the roof, then we can get above the water, said Rose. We can climb on furniture, said Annie. Good, said Rose. The dresser, the chest, the chair. Jack and Annie pushed the tall dresser under the hole in the ceiling. They hoisted a chair on top of the dresser, and then they pushed a blanket chest against the dresser to help them climb up. Rose, you go first, said Jack. Use the chest to get up onto the dresser, and then use the chair to get to the roof. Once you're safe, we'll hand Lily up. Annie took the baby from Rose. She whispered softly to her as Rose climbed from the chest into the top of the dresser. Careful, said Jack. Rose then climbed onto the chair. She grabbed the edge of the torn roof and hauled herself up. Now, Lily, she called to Jack and Annie. Jack climbed up on the chest, then the dresser, and then he stood up on the chair and reached down as Annie held the baby up to him. The baby was heavier than Jack had expected. He steadied himself on the chair and then lifted Lily up towards Rose. Jack held the baby as high as he could. Rose grabbed Lily and pulled her onto the roof. You go next, Jack said to Annie. He stepped off the chair. Annie climbed onto the dresser. Jack held the chair steady as she pulled herself up onto the roof. Jack followed. He stood on the chair and peered above the roof. The wind and rain pounded him. He felt the chair shaking. The dresser shook too. The whole house was shaking. With no time to think, Jack gripped the edge of the broken roof and pulled himself up. He joined the others on the wind-blown, soggy rooftop. Battered by wind and rain, they all crouched around the baby. They held each other tightly. The house shook beneath them. "How can we get to higher ground?" Jack shouted. "I don't know," said Rose. Jack looked around. In the last light of the early evening, all of Galveston seemed covered by water. Suddenly, there was a loud crack. The house was sliding off its pillars. It was splitting in two. Rose cried out. Jack and Annie clung more tightly to her and Lily. There were more loud cracking sounds. Half of the house crumbled into the churning seawater. The roof over them, other half, broke completely free of the house, with all of them on it. "Hang on!" cried Annie. Jack and Annie held on to Rose and Lily as the wind pushed the roof into the floodwaters. Lily let out a wail. Rose started singing. Her voice was surprisingly strong. Annie began singing along. "Hush, little baby, don't say a word. Papa's gonna buy you a mockingbird." As the voices rose above the wind, Jack saw crumbling buildings. He saw people floating on mattresses, on boards, and even in washtubs. Jack heard cries of help from survivors on rooftops. He saw others hanging onto tree limbs. He wished he and Annie could help everyone, but there was no way to steer the roof raft. Every time the wind shifted, the direction of the waves shifted with it. The rooftop kept turning and moving with the stormy waters. Lily finally fell asleep. Rose and Annie stopped singing. "Where are we?" asked Annie. Rose looked around in the dim light and gasped. "The Gulf! I think we're headed towards the Gulf," she cried. "The Gulf?" said Jack. "You mean we might end up in the ocean?" "Oh, no," said Annie. But the wind shifted again. The water current changed. The roof spun around and began moving in another direction. Jack didn't know what to do except hang on to the others. "Are you both all right?" Rose asked. "I'm good," said Jack. "Me too," said Annie. "Are you okay, Rose?" "I don't know," she said. "I can't figure out what to do." "There's nothing that we can do," said Annie. "We have to wait for all of it to end." "I think you're right, Annie," said Rose. Adrift of the black floodwaters, the roof raft rose and fell with the waves. Storm wreckage crashed against it, but the current kept pushing the raft through the wreckage. Jack and Annie held on tightly to Rose. As she cradled the baby, drifting through the storm, they all rocked back and forth together. After a while, Jack gave in to his tiredness. His head nodded. His eyes started to close. Chapter 7. A Safe Place. "Jack, Jack, are you awake?" said Annie. Jack blinked a few times. "What?" he asked groggily. It was dark and the night was still. The rain had stopped. The water was calm. Branches and boards gently bumped against the roof raft. "Look at that castle," said Annie. "What castle?" said Rose. "What castle?" echoed Jack. In a daze, he looked around at the darkness. "Over there," said Annie. The full moon peeking out from the clouds, moonlight shone on castle towers rising above the water. "Oh, man," said Jack. "Is that a real castle?" "No, I'm afraid not," said Rose. "It's a school run by Catholic nuns. It's called the Ursuline Academy." "Ursuline Academy," said Jack. He sat straight up, fully awake. "Ursuline Academy," exclaimed Annie. "I don't believe it." "What? Why?" asked Rose. "That's a safe place," said Annie. "We read about it in our Texas book. People survived the hurricane there." "What are you talking about?" said Rose. "Annie, you're remembering the description in our guidebook." Jack said quickly, "The book just said that it was a tall, sturdy building. You must have dreamed the rest." "Oh, right," Annie said. "I dreamed it, but it definitely looked like a tall, sturdy place, doesn't it?" "It looks dark," said Rose. "I know," said Annie, "but I'll bet lots of people are inside the Ursuline Academy, and I feel like they're safe." "I'm feeling that too," said Jack. "I think we should go there." "But how do we get there?" said Rose. "Jack and Annie, get out, get in the water and push the roof," said Annie. "You're good swimmers." "Oh, no, no, that's too dangerous," said Rose. "There's wreckage everywhere. Maybe we can use some of it," said Annie. "What do you mean?" said Rose. "We could try to find something to use as paddles," said Annie. "Good idea," said Jack. He and Annie leaned over the edge of the raft, searching the water. Jack lifted up part of a chair. Annie retrieved a torn basket. "These won't work," said Jack. They put them back in the water. "Hey, this might," said Annie. She hauled a flat wooden fence picket onto the raft. "Try this," said Jack. Annie knelt on the roof. She pushed the narrow slat through the water. The raft moved, but only a little. "We need a second paddle," said Annie. From the other side, "Look, a broom," said Jack. He lifted the broomstick out of the water. A flat bundle of wet straw was tied tightly at the end. Jack pushed the straw through the end of the broom through the water. At the same time, Annie pushed with her fence paddle. "We're moving," said Rose. Jack and Annie kept paddling the raft towards the moonlit towers of the Ursuline Academy. As they drew closer, they saw that the massive building was partially damaged. Its tall arched windows were smashed. But suddenly, a light appeared. "Hello," Rose shouted. "Hello," a woman called back. "Is it safe inside?" Rose called. "I have children with me." "Yes, we can help," the woman called. Jack and Annie kept paddling their roof raft through the water. When they got near to the academy, Jack could see two women at the window. Both were dressed in black robes with large white collars. Their heads were covered. Jack realized that they must be Catholic nuns. The younger woman held a lantern. The older one was leaning out the window. "Keep paddling. You're going to make it," she called to them. "Oh my, that's Mother Mary Joseph," said Rose. "Who is she?" asked Annie. "Mother Mary Joseph is in charge of the school and all the nuns. She is much loved in Galveston," said Rose. The raft finally reached the window. Jack grabbed the windowsill to hold the floating roof steady. The younger nun held the lantern. Mother Mary Joseph helped Rose and Lily climb through the window. "You go next," Jack said to Annie. Annie crawled through the window, and then she grabbed the edge of the roof raft. She held it steady while Jack climbed inside the building. "We're safe," said Annie. Jack took a deep breath. They were in a long hallway with dark wooden walls. "Welcome, all of you," said Mother Mary Joseph. "Sister Agnes will stay here with the lantern while I take you to the auditorium. But first, you children must put shoes on your feet. Our hallway is littered with broken glass." The nuns reached into a bag and pulled out two pairs of shoes. They were both black lace-ups. Jack and Annie each took a pair and put them on. Jack's shoes were too long and too narrow. They really looked silly on him. Rose laughed. It was good to hear her laugh, Jack thought. He laughed with her. "At least they'll protect your feet." Rose said. "Come," said Mother Mary Joseph. As he walked down the hallway, every step in the tight shoes was painful for Jack. Mother Mary Joseph led them into the auditorium. The huge room was filled with hundreds of children. Oil lamps cast shadows on men, women, and children. Everyone looked weary. Their clothes were torn and wet. "Oh, so many people," said Rose. "Yes," said Sister Mary Joseph. "They're from every walk of life, rich, poor, black, white, young, and old. Some have lost members of their families. Many have wounds or broken bones. All of them are refugees from the storm.